Today we're going to be recrafting a pair of Allen Edmonds Randolphs. And one thing about Allen Edmonds that a lot of people love about the shoe, especially me and a lot of other cobblers when you recraft, is that 360-degree welt they have. They're really easy to recraft, come apart, they put together well. It's really a great shoe not only to wear but to recraft and have for years to come. So it is one of my favorites to do. So one thing about this shoe, you'll notice the left one has a hole through the center. The right one's still pretty solid, not too bad. A lot of people wonder why they wear that left one out. Well, a lot of you know, a lot of you have been told, but for those who don't know, this is your pivot foot getting in and out of the car. So a lot of times, if you're wearing that left one out quicker than the right one, if you're in and out of the car a lot when you're wearing these, that's the reason. Because that left foot goes out, you have pivot getting in and you pivot getting out. So today we're going to recraft these with a pair of JR full soles. Now here I have an original Allen Edmonds that came on a customer shoe. They actually send them in right away when they bought them brand new because they wanted the JR oak bark. The important thing about a good leather sole is the fiber structure. And one thing about the JR leather, which is one of the highest qualities in the world that you can get, it's tanned with oak bark. And the oak bark naturally waterproofs the leather. It's in a pit for 8 to 12 months depending on the thickness of the sole, to where a regular vegetable tannage can be produced in 30 days or less. When they get wet, the man-made tanning agents will wash out of the leather, and that will make the wear less desirable. They do wear much faster. Plus, depending on where they're cut from the hide, makes a difference too. If you get closer to the side and the belly, then the fiber structure is looser and they wear faster. The JR leather is all cut from the strongest part of the hide. The fiber structure is really tight, plus you're getting that oak bark tannage. And if you watch the difference, like from the fiber structure, if I bend this down and let it go, you can see that's because the fiber structure is pretty loose in the sole. Plus it's heavier because it's got those man-made tanning agents in it, so they are a bit heavier. So we can take an oak bark tannage sole and I can bend it down. The fiber structure is so tight, you can just see it bounces back up. It's just because it's like trying to bend something that's very rigid. It just doesn't bend so well, but yet it is flexible enough for a shoe, so you don't have to worry about that. But it's important for how long it's going to wear and how durable it's going to be against the elements outside. So another thing we're going to do today is we're going to replace that original heel base with the JR heel block. It's produced the same way, all oak bark tanned. So that heel block is not going to get destroyed if you get it wet, to where a lot of the bases that come on shoes are made out of a pressed leather. If you get them wet, sometimes they do come apart, and we don't have to worry about that with the JR products. So everything's JR, including the combination heel today we're going to put on. We're going to put on a real nice JR combo heel. Everything is top quality. You can't get any better. So this shoe will wear 2 to 3 times longer once we're done with everything. And then we're going to put that original edging back on with the color, and let's get started. As you can see, it's very fibrous, but the particle leather-like. It's just pressed leather. You can see a lot of it still stuck on the shoe here. So that's one reason I really highly recommend that JR heel base. All right. Nice thing about the 360 welt, the soles just come off so nice and easy. All right, so there we go. A little bit of cork damage, but we'll repair all that. Shank inside is not cracked, so that's good. A lot of the wooden shanks sometimes crack, and we'll replace those, but this one's good, so we'll leave it alone. All right, so there's the back side of that sole. This is called a heel pry. Just as you can see what I'm doing, I can just put it under the heel and pop it off. This knife goes in between the welt and the sole. When you hear the threads popping like that, it's a nice sound when you're a craftsman recrafting shoes, because you know that it's going to come off easy and not too much damage. So there we go. Cork still looks really good in that one too. All right. So a lot of times, if the cork's really good, it's in really good shape, I don't disturb it. A lot of times people have issues with their foot. They'll have a dropped metatarsal or a little bit of a foot deformity, and you can see where they have some wear, like if you look in the footbed where it's pushed down and there might be a bump coming up through the cork. Well, sometimes if you hammer that down, fill it in with cork, when they put it back on, they're going to feel like they have a lump in their shoe because it's now pressing up against that metatarsal head. So we're always very careful about that. Okay, so that was quick, and now we're going to pick these stitches out. So now we're going to lightly sand this welt, and when I say lightly, it's just to freshen up the leather so the glue will penetrate nicely and give us a good secure bond, and at the same time makes it a little easier to pick these stitches out. We always want to pick the stitches out of the shoe for several reasons, one being it definitely looks a lot nicer. Okay. All right, so we're going to pick these stitches out. A lot of times I pick them out by hand. Depending on the shoe, we do have what we call a stitch picker. With an Allen Edmonds, this is really a quick, easy, efficient way to do it. They come out really nice on that. A few I'll have to pick out by hand. Depending on how the shoe is stitched, determines whether we're going to sit down and pick each one out by hand or use the machine or not. Because the last thing you want to do is get a shoe that's got a tight welt and you can scuff up or damage the upper. All right, so we have all the stitches picked. We've leveled out the cork. We're in good shape there. Next, we're just going to put the glue on the shoes and on the soles. Now the nice thing about glue, a lot of you guys might be interested in this. I don't know, I like it, but there's something in the contact cement called green strength. And the green strength is, once they've been connected, it just continues to get us to be a stronger and stronger bond up to about 24 hours. So once I press these on, they're already going to be really nice and tight. After about 30 to 45 minutes, they're going to reach about 95% of its strength, but over the next 24 hours, it'll dry and be 100% as far as the bond goes. So it's it's really super strong. You could really glue this on here and not even stitch it, especially with this adhesive we're using. I would trust it that much. So if you ever were to wear through to the stitches, you don't have to worry about this sole coming apart because that glue is so strong. So roll that on there, try to get that centered as best as we can. You'll always have a little discoloration in the sole because it's a true oak bark tannage. It's sitting in water for, like I said, 8 to 12 months. So you're always going to have little water stains in it. Now we'll even that out with some polish when we're done, so it's really not so noticeable. But if you ever get one of these JR soles and you notice that, that's just normal. And that's a good thing, because when you're looking at a true oak bark tannage sole, if it's completely perfect and clean, something's not right if they're calling it an oak bark tannage. Now another thing I will say about JR that I like, it's the highest quality oak bark tannage sole you can get. There's only 2 left in Germany. But the nice thing I like about JR is the oak bark is key. If you're a coffee connoisseur, you'll appreciate this. The oak bark is only used one time when they're tanning these soles, and then it's actually used for mulch afterwards with landscapers. So that's nice. Other companies out there will use the bark over and over several times, and it's kind of like using the same coffee grounds 2 or 3 times to make another pot of coffee. So that's a good way to compare it. So if you've got anybody out there that says this one's just as good, sorry, it's not. All right, so I'm rolling this welt just to make sure everything's 100% sealed down there. All right, now you'll be able to hear that grain. You can hear how softer this is. It's not as loud. I don't know if you could hear that difference. All right, so we're going to cut this sole. I just want you to hear the difference in the fiber structure. This one's not going to be as loud. Now the JR with the real high density. You can just hear how much tighter that is. And if you look at the difference in the color in a regular vegetable tannage versus the oak bark, just you can see the grain, it's much tighter, and plus the darkness from the oak bark. All right, so we have all the stitches picked out of here, as you can see, and of course this is a little rough, so we're going to go ahead and trim that, smooth it out real nice, and then we'll groove it. This is not going to be a blind stitch, so we'll just do an open channel is what we call it. All right. All right. I like to try to keep everything nice and clean as possible. Now, a lot of people say, you know, we notice you don't sand most of your soles. Most of them I don't sand because that top layer is the highest abrasion part of the sole. So I like to keep that, you know, with its natural finish without bottom sanding it. Now, a lot of times we'll buff it lightly if we do a blind stitch. We have a Scotch-Brite wheel. We'll just buff it to smooth everything off real good and even it out when we're done, but we're not digging into the grain of the leather. So that's one thing that's very important with the wear. That first millimeter and a half is the best wearing part of the leather, so we like to leave that alone. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is stitch these guys. All right, so as you can see, get back in the original holes on those, on both of them. So that makes me happy. So now we don't have any extra holes in the welt. All right, so we're putting the JR leather heel bases on. Everything's nice and dry. And I've got one in the press already, actually. So just line that up real good. All right. Okay, so I'm going to sand the base and level off that heel block. Make sure everything sits nice and flat. And then we're going to glue the top lift on, the combination top lift on after we're done with that. All right. Going to use the adhesive to bond these on with as well. Now on these, I'll put a few, once these are done, I'll put a few brass nails in there just to look nice. It won't be doing anything as far as holding the heel on itself. The glue will do that. Okay, get that centered real nice. And we're going to press those guys on there as well. Trim this guy. This is an old lip knife. There's still a few guys using these. All right, so here we go. I haven't polished or buffed anything yet, but we've left it nice and clean. No oil stains, no marks. And now we're going to go over to the finishing department and finish these guys up. You know, I like this natural look, so I'm just going to use some natural polish on the bottom. And the main reason I'm putting this on here is it'll kind of even out any water stains from the oak bark tannage itself. But mainly, while I'm polishing the shoe, if I were to happen to get any stain on the bottom, I can wipe it right off. Because believe me, the last thing you want to do is get a nice looking bottom and then spill something or sit it in something. Just buffing off that leather to give it a little bit of a shine and a protective barrier. So you can see it's got a little bit of a shine. No stain or dye, just natural. Now for some of you guys looking at this saying, what is he using? It's actually sapphire shoe cream in a tube with a sponge. So it just makes it nice and easy to put on the edge. Just go right around it. Some of you guys out there that take care of your shoes and like to shine them, this makes it real nice for the edging, really easy, in case you don't like to use a liquid. I'll use liquid for dark brown and black, but for lighter colors I'll use this just because I can get a really good match. It dries fast and it's not messy. Of course, I've got a high-speed buffing machine, which makes it easier for me. Some of you guys gotta just take your rag and your brush and just buff it out. Still not bad. You can take a rag and buff that out nice. See, like I got a little bit over the edge here, but since I put that neutral shoe cream on there, I can just wipe that right off and it won't stain. That's why I do it, just to protect it. Kirby set me up with going to the Gaziano Girling factory over in outside of London a couple years ago, and I got to meet a guy over there. I think he won second place in the Shoe Shining World Championships. Just an amazing artist. Shoe polish, patina, and an amazing person as well. And one thing I like that he did that I'd never seen done before is he'd put that cream on, let it dry just a minute or two, and then he would go behind it with one coat of paste wax, just one, and he would just go ahead and do the whole shoe with it. Not heavy, just light, because if you put too much paste wax on, it'll crack. So usually when you're putting layers of paste wax on, you're just going to do the toe. But since this is kind of just a dress loafer, we don't want to give it a super mirror shine. We just want to make it look nice. There's one little faded spot there. All right, so you can see how nice that heel block came out just with that cream polish we used out of the tube. The coloring here is nice and even. You know, that was the one coat of cream and one light coat of wax, and it's buffed up to a nice shine. And here's the finished bottoms. And with that, we're going to call it a day. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for subscribing to the Hanger Project and Kirby Allison. We really appreciate everything you guys do out there for us. I mean, you guys are an investment, so we try hard to do everything to perfection the best we can. And Kirby Allison's program is top-notch. He only uses the best in materials, and then I do the best I possibly can, that's for sure. Try to give you the best service we can. And once again, we really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it. See you guys later.